Before we jump in, let me just say this episode is packed. It's not every day you hear a CEO talk about installing urinals himself, handing out ice cream in meetings, and leading with equal parts grit, humility, and fun. Sean Henry, president and CEO of the Nashville Predators, brings the kind of leadership that doesn't just build winning teams, it builds winning cultures. We talk about what he learned from working as a teenage busboy, the leadership mistake that still sticks with him, and how fun became a strategic advantage inside one of the NHL's top-ranked workplaces. If you care about building culture, leading people, or just want a better way to run your team, this one's worth sticking around for. Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Welcome to the No Limit Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Sean Patton, and today we have someone very special. Sean Henry is the president and CEO of the Nashville Predators, and under his leadership, the team has not only been a force on the ice, but a powerhouse in building culture, community, and connection. As Sean brings serious energy, heart, and hustle to everything he does, from working on the boardwalk as a teenager to getting his name engraved on the Stanley Cup, Sean has one of the most unique and inspiring journeys in sports leadership. He's built one of the most admired workplace cultures in the NHL, led the charge in making Smashville a top destination in sports entertainment, and has become a civic leader in Nashville, using his platform to create real impact. I know this conversation is going to be packed with inside stories and a whole lot of fun. Sean Henry, welcome to the show, brother.
Man, that last line's scary, man. Now I got to deliver.
I know. I do the opposite of what I like to do in my life for my guests. I just like to set high standards. I like to keep things low in my own life. But man, we got connected because you graciously gave your time to the group I'm a part of, which is the West Point Entrepreneurial Group, and we had a summit in Nashville. And I really enjoyed your talk, and I'm a huge fan of the work you do. So thanks for being here today. Just thanks for being here.
Well, I appreciate it. That's an inspiring group, man. There's, number one, I think 90% of the people in that room chose to serve our nation, which it's always humbling to be around a group of people like that. And then the second is almost everyone in there is also an entrepreneur, where, kind of putting it all on the line, on every front, your career, your ego, your family, and then obviously the investment. And you walk out of there thinking, my gosh, I've accomplished nothing in my life, number one. Number two, you're just so inspired. So that was a really nice afternoon to spend. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I want to dive right into it. You have such a unique background and told some stories around, literally starting your career on the ground floor, bussing tables on the Jones Beach boardwalk. I believe it's in Long Island, right?
That is correct. Yeah. The garden spot of the country, I thought, makes the most beautiful beach in the world until I saw a second one.
So, how did those early, gritty jobs like sweeping sand off the patio for minimum wage shape you and your perspective in terms of your plan to move up and have a career?
Oh, it's a question I'm asked a lot. I don't think I ever answer it very well. For me, I'm really fortunate. I have 5 older siblings. There's a pretty big age gap between me and the next one. They're all about a year apart. And, those 5, pretty inspiring to me. Kind of raised me with my parents. Work ethic was everything. Treating people, the right way, or striving to, is just what you did. It wasn't really something you set out like, oh, this is a goal of mine. I should think about this. It was, no, that's just what you do. That translated to, my really very first job. And even before that, I worked for my dad on the side. He's a carpenter. So when he did a side job, I was always with him. And his mantra was very simple. You just leave every job site better than when you found it. And I'll never forget, we were in a restaurant once putting up molding around like some door frames. Pretty easy job overnight. And the place was disgusting, absolutely nasty. And I remember I went in the kitchen to get something, and there had this one refrigerator that was a brownie refrigerator. It's just full of brownies. And my gosh, like I just hit, Willy Wonka's factory. So I remember my dad came around the corner and I had frosting all over my face and crumbs all over. I was like, what did you do? You just stole. I was like, I didn't steal the brownies, So of course he made me clean it up, maybe pay for them. But when we were getting ready to leave, he was like, hey, we have to vacuum the dining room. I said, wow, what got here is nasty. He's like, yeah. He said, but tomorrow when they come in, and they know it's going to be cleaner than when they left it, and our work's going to look better. And that kind of never left me. And again, when I was a busboy, I knew one thing. If I did a better job than Mike Butler, the guy next to me, a good friend of mine, I'd get more hours. And the more hours you got, the bigger your paycheck was. The bigger your paycheck was, the easier your life was in certain areas, took away some worries. So it really was just a work ethic defined by that's what you do. And then the greedy part of me saying, if you do a good job and make someone else's life easier, people are going to treat you differently. Kind of followed that my whole life by accident. And it's weird, certain things become habits. Habits become just who we are. So I've always been pretty proud of being the best busboy that driver Moses and Jones Beach. And I know it sounds a little silly, a little arrogant, but I tell you, I can call 4 or 5 guys I worked with back then, 40 years ago, and reluctantly they'd be like, shoot, yeah, he was better than us. And I wasn't better. I just knew if I worked harder, I'd get more hours. It was that simple. I also knew when to do certain tricks. Was it going to start raining out? Because you're going to get sent home if it rains at the beach. Start doing a project no one else wants to finish. So there's some manipulation in that too. You start pulling all the kegs out of the walk-in refrigerator, scrubbing the floor, and all of a sudden you're a 19-year-old supervisor. Like, it was all children that ran it. Realizes she doesn't want to finish that. So you got to, get your extra 2, 3, 4 hours.
There's so much in that, like as a teenager, in terms of like, there's like the altruistic work ethic and just doing the right thing, leaving things better than you found it, providing value. If you provide enough value to other people, it'll come back to you. And then there's the, make yourself invaluable to the people that you work for. Got a whole life lessons there running around the beach.
It's funny, years and years ago, we were designing a new sales plan or commission plan. And I remember my boss, who was a mentor of mine, I met him when I was 22 years old, and we were in Detroit together, at Tampa together, he invested in a company I was part of. And he said, why are we doing it this way? I said, man, we have to hit on true rewards for people that do really good work. Well, you also have to figure out what's important to them and lay the path out that way, so they don't have to manipulate themselves like me pulling kegs out. And I remember telling that same story. I was like, the right people are going to be motivated for all the right reasons. But there's some selfish nature in all of us. And if we can hit that trigger too, it can be a pretty magical sales plan. And we ended up leading the league in attendance that year in Tampa, Florida, of all places.
Wow. Yeah. So, it's so interesting. I was facilitating a mastermind with a bunch of senior sales leaders, CROs, and we had some lively discussions about comp plans and some of those the basic lessons you just called out of like, how do you align personal goals and motivations with company goals and the magic happening when you align that. But I think, I don't know if you've seen this. I see so many leaders that the assumption is it's always money, or the assumption is whatever motivates them motivates the person. Maybe it's a promotion. Like especially in sales, not every salesperson wants to get promoted,
No.
So but you got to have those personal conversations. I wonder what your approach has been, especially maybe in that instance, to try to draw out like what are those real motivations in the individuals inside your organization.
Yeah, I think that's always driven. You hit it already by conversations. Getting to know people, and I don't read management books. They kind of make me laugh. People that talk about them all the time. But there's one that I think is good. It's called Fun is Good, and it's Mike Beck wrote it. Bill Beck's son. It's one of the best promoters in sports history. But the whole thing is just get to know people. Celebrate when things are good, and when things are bad, don't get too down. But have an honest dialogue and conversation about it. But if that's the only time you're talking to people, you're never going to get to know them. It's important to have a robust beverage area. The most dynamic, cool coffee machine, soda, juices, water. And we have all these crazy machines upstairs for one reason. One, it's healthy for people to drink a little bit more water. Two, people save money instead of running down the road to some expensive coffee shop if you have it in your own house. But most importantly, you end up spending an extra half hour a day or so just talking to people about a game last night, their son's graduation, their daughter's game, dance recital. You don't even know that you're getting to know people. More importantly, they don't know you're getting to know them. So then you understand what motivates that person a little differently, because we are all different. And none of us knew that not that long ago. But it was a pretty cool lecture that someone else was giving. And it's so fundamental. I can't believe it took me to my age to understand this a few years ago. So when you write an email to 10 people, how many emails did you write? I'm like, what is this, the riddle of Sphinx? I mean, you write one email. And then you realize as he says it, oh, you're right. I just wrote 10 emails. Like, how will each person perceive it? When are you sending it? What's the tone of each person within that department? It's multi-department. And once you break it down and realize that, one, you'll send less emails or mass emails, because you should structure them a little bit differently. But every single person whether they went to the same college, grew up in the same suburb, started the same day in the same position. Even the most liked people in the world are so different on what's driving them that day. And I always thought it was going to be about money or time off or a bottle of liquor or free tickets to this or whatever. And it's not the same for everybody.
I love that. So it sounds like there's so many good lessons there. I'm wondering, as you made some of those moves, and it could be recent or maybe some of those early uh, career advancements from teenagers in your early years, you sound like you get some great mentors, but I'm sure you had some other experiences of like what not to do. I wonder if there were some leadership mistakes or stories there that you could point to and be like, okay, I'm glad I saw that or did that because now I know not to do it in the future.
Yeah, again, I'm very fortunate, and it really does start with my parents, who are just two of the most incredible people you could ever meet. They grew up they were born in the Depression era. Dad's youngest of 10. Worked his whole life. College was not an option for either one of them. Both first generation Americans, but they also had parents that drove them and pushed them forward. They got married young, but they understood the value of education. They understood the value of work, which is kind of funny because they didn't go to college, but they knew it was so important. Again, two of the smartest people I've known instilled reading into all of us. And, if you read, you're going to enjoy it. If you enjoy reading, you're going to write a little bit better. Like sometimes you don't even know you're being improved by things that you enjoy. So for me, it always starts with them and some of the stories that they've shared. And literally being on job sites with my dad when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and then working with him always. We got my union card early on, and probably the worst carpenter in the history of the world. And it's tough being a carpenter's son. It's pretty tough sandals to fill, You get that one later. But, there's some really, really cool values you learn on a job site because everyone's different. You have a lot of different trades. You have people that are there for a week, guys that are there for 40 years. That alone, you start understanding how to be around people that are a little different than you. So to me, that was always really important. Again, I've always thought I had great mentors. I tell stories from time to time. Our president, Michelle Kennedy, be like, wait a minute, why did you like that person again? It seems like they were awful to you. Like, no, it was always good. But there's one guy in particular that stands out that, I don't care for. I don't know how I got hoodwinked by him. He's not attractive, was not articulate, was not smart, was not kind. Like, there's not one redeeming quality in this human. With that said, I left my company that I was with since I was 14 years old. It was a startup HDTV company. I was going to be the next Microsoft type of thing, in this mid-90s. I was the third employee. I don't understand how I followed this guy. I really don't. And he got a lot of people to invest in the company, and he turned out years later, I realized he never believed in what we were doing. Never thought we could be successful. It was just him improving his own lifestyle. But the biggest thing I learned from him in a negative way was don't make your passions other people's burdens. And I hate the University of Illinois so much. And I say that so proudly. They just played in our building Saturday night. It was a great game. The UT and them, so orange was everywhere. And I wanted UT to win so badly for one reason. This guy loved Illinois. And every Saturday, and I didn't care about college football. I didn't grow up with it. And now I'm jealous of people that, have that passion. And now my passion is where my kids go to school. I like them. But every Saturday in football season, we had to get together and watch Illinois with him because that's what he loved. And we'd have a business meeting around it. But we never got any work done. I had a 2-year-old son at home that I was leaving on a Saturday at noon or 1 or 3 or 4. And maybe a year into it, I said, why are we doing this? We don't get any work done. You're taking my own time away where maybe I could be working or being with my family or doing whatever. And he said, no, we all like this. And that's when I realized the hubris or the arrogance of certain leaders. And if I like it, we all must like it. So it scarred me probably to a degree where I like parties. I like getting together. I like socializing. But I'm so afraid of inviting subordinates to dinner or lunch or party because they're going to say yes. And what I always say to people, I want you to say no. If you have anything going on, if you're planning on raking your leaves that day, do not come. And I know some people will always still say yes, but I think it's important to remind people that when you are doing things socially, let me know if you can't make it. Like there's no obligation here. Because unfortunately, a lot of this, and this time of year especially, we all talk to our friends. We're like, hey, what are you doing tonight? Oh, God. My boss invited me out to a Christmas party. I have to go. And they're like, no, it should be joyful. And I've learned more from that. Like, don't think inviting someone somewhere is going to be as beneficial to them as you think it's going to be. And make people feel comfortable missing out on things. And I think that's improved our culture here more than anything else. Now, at the same time, I have people around me like, stop telling people not to come if they don't want to. Because that's off-putting as well. But again, I mean, when I first got here, we had full company parties at my house. Labor Day weekend, we'd have a big barbecue in the backyard. We had about 150 employees back then. So it was crammed. It was tight. You're doing all the cooking. But we love hosting people. My wife and I, my kids, right before COVID, moved into a new house. We had the Christmas party at my house. And then we had 350 employees. My house isn't built for that, but a crowded house is a good place. And it shows people you care about them and you want to serve them. So servant leadership is important. At the same time, you got to make sure people are okay not coming. And by the way, I hope they lose every game they ever play in every sport.
Noted. Yeah, we'll make sure that gets out there. What was the transition into, after that, you talked about the HDTV kind of startup, and that ultimately went bankrupt, right?
It did. So I went there. I was at my company, Volume Services, from teenage years, through meeting my wife, getting married, having our first child, moving quite a few times, and I was on the golden path to the boardroom. The CEO, vice presidents above me were just really good people. Knew me since I was a teenager. Understood what drove me and manipulated that a little bit, but for good reasons. And I remember going to our CEO saying, "Look, I was offered this job. The Pistons are investing money in this company. It's a startup. It could fail tomorrow." And he encouraged me to do it. He's like, if you don't do this, you'll always regret it. And he said, jump off. I ended up cashing my 401k, investing every dollar we had, and I really believed in what we were doing. And it worked. I mean, we were the first to broadcast, first to sell TVs. We broke the chicken and the egg with programming and equipment. There were no TVs, there's no programming, no programmers, there were no TVs. And we were doing it. What we didn't realize is the guy in charge was truly just squandering, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on vanity things that we just didn't need. And, we brought in a VC firm that two of the VC guys, or one of them went to jail, one died before he would have. It was a good lesson in really understanding who you're aligning yourself with. And that's important too. Sometimes you get so flattered that, my gosh, this visionary wants to hire me and he's giving me hundreds of thousands of shares of stock that if it hits, it's going to be worth multiples of that. Instead of sitting down and saying, "Oh, all right, who is the guy? Do you want to have dinner with them? Do you want him at your house for your son's birthday party?" And if you can't say yes to those, you probably shouldn't work with them in an intimate setting, 2, 3, 4, 5 employees. Maybe that could work in a larger company. I don't think it can. I got very good lessons from the Pistons. When I went back to the Pistons, we bought the Lightning of, Mr. Davidson, the owner of the Pistons, best owner in the history of sports, self-made billionaire, conquered many, many in the industry, invented what we all do. But I only spent one, weekend with him. We were just talking in general. He was in his last year of life, not that he knew that, or maybe he did. So he was giving out a lot of good advice. And I'll never forget, he said, just always make sure you're aligning yourself with people that you would admire and you want your kids to be around. And I thought, how simple, but how true. And right after that, I was offered a job with a sports team that would have been kind of going back home. And I just could not reconcile the owner with, do I want to be around him? And his son-in-law was around. I had some weird people working for him. And it was a dream job, I thought. And I remember sitting down with the president of Lightning saying, I'm going to turn it down. And he said, how and why? Like, you're going back home, taking over a team that was iconic and has kind of fallen on hard times. And I said, man, the guy's weird. And he said, all right, well, I'm glad you're staying. It was great. But I think those are really good lessons. And I learned that the most from that company that went bankrupt. I mean, going through bankruptcy at the time was painful and awful. Looking back, it was the best thing I've ever gone through. It was like a master's class. But the biggest thing I learned is, I give this advice to everyone. If I tell people, if you're thinking about leaving, come talk to me. We'll help you. In that interview process, we'll help you along the journey and the path. But most importantly, if you're going to work somewhere, make sure you like the people you're going to work for. And you may be wrong, once you get to know them better. But if there's something in your gut saying, man, I just don't know about that person, just say no. The next job's always there.
That's such good advice. Peel back the curtain a bit. Took the entrepreneurial leap right out of the military. I knew that I wanted to do what I'm doing today, which is work with leaders and be in leadership development. 4 years at West Point, 10 years in the infantry and special forces. I feel like I'd crammed a lifetime of leadership lessons into those 14 years. But I didn't want to be the military officer, got out and was like, all right, business leaders, let me tell you about real leadership when I'd never been in business a day in my life. And so I thought, what's the quickest way for me to, see what works, what doesn't, And what applies and what doesn't. It's like, well, get a formal education in business. So I got my MBA. And then it was, if I could start a company and get it self-sustainingly profitable. Doesn't have to be $1 billion company, just has to make money without me there. That seems to be, I'll learn these lessons. And I learned in my first 3 years that starting a business with zero business or industry experience is the fastest way to make as many mistakes as possible. And so my own bankruptcy later, went from Green Beret commander, everything. And then it was just your point. It was like those hard years of, in that 4-year span, I went through a painful divorce, left the military, the only job I'd ever known, and got money from friends and family and took a loan and went bankrupt. And it was like, it's so hard and it hits so different. And I can't imagine doing that, having a family at the time because it was just me really. But
it was funny. My parents' first and only investment they've ever made was in that company. My brother invested, my sister invested, my brother-in-law invested, a bunch of my friends invested. Again, we cashed out our 401k because I believed in it. They believed in it because of me. And that crushes you, right? When people closest to you, you think you let down. Years later, you reconcile and like, no, you didn't. It didn't work. I'm like, wow, and you don't know that when you're, 30 years old.
Yeah, it's tough. You do learn those lessons. And then, from there, I want to fast forward. You stayed with that company, you went back to Detroit, and then you ended up with the opportunity to go to Tampa Bay. And that was a very unique situation with where that franchise was at and that town was at. And you got almost like, it sounds like tasked with a turnaround plan, at a company. So tell me what that experience was like.
It was the best thing I've ever been a part of until I came to Nashville. The Pistons invented our industry, and they truly did. They built really the first arena that contemplated more than sports. It was like, we're going to run this whole business. It was built around fan amenities, around signage, around the first suites ever built, really by design or in that building. Other venues built suites into the old press box or, whatever. The building was designed, 88 it opened, and the whole mentality was fans first. Let's, embrace our partners, our players, our performers, our employees, and our fans. And I was just fortunate because, I went there right out of college. And I thought that's how everyone is. Like, that's just, of course. And I'm just, on one hand, I'm so lucky I got that early on because it's amazing, 30 plus years later, there's still a lot of teams that are like, well, that's not our problem. The city owns our building, or blah, 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 blah. Own it like it's yours. And if you do that, life gets easier. But when we went down to Tampa, we were so arrogant because, we're the best sports entertainment company in the world. The Pistons, again, invented what we do. And we own 2 amphitheaters, busiest amphitheater in the country. One of the busiest arenas in the country. We're going to show up and sell out. Like, my gosh, look at who we are. And what we neglected to realize is, probably the best lesson I learned, I brought in a few people from Detroit. I flew in from St. Louis. And everyone there must be a screw up. And that's why they were so bad. And how dumb, right? But this is where leadership kicks in. We were the third owner in 3 years. The 70 employees that were there heard the same thing from each group. We're going to do this. We're going to be great. You're going to have the freedom to do this. Handcuffs are off. Whatever silliness was said. We all said the same thing, maybe slightly differently. And I remember like doing the same thing with the rah-rah. And I was, 30 years old, not even, 30 years old, full of myself. And, Tom Wilson, our CEO, was, again, I say this admiringly and lovingly. If he were here, he'd laugh. He was pretty proud of himself as well. Ron Campbell, our president, same thing. Bill Wickett, our chief PR guy. We're all pretty arrogant, I guess you would say, if you were listening. But I remember being at the podium talking about all the great things we're going to do, blah, 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 you're going to be empowered. And every face just stared at me like this. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with these people? So afterwards, I grabbed 2 or 3 people that seemed, pretty cool. I said, why weren't you fired up? Like, why weren't we fired up? Because it's July 5th and you made us come in for a stupid meeting. I was like, what do you mean? It's July 5th. It's a Friday. We could have had a 4-day weekend. We had to listen to your dumb ass tell us about all the things that the last guy told us. And by the way, the last guy told us that. And you're not going to listen to us. You're not going to do this. And I realized, oh my gosh, we have work to do. We have to prove to them where we're going, how we're doing it, not the other way around. And that was a good wake-up call. And that's exactly what we did. We flipped it over to the employees, flipped over to the fans, like, tell us what we're doing wrong. And, what are the handful of things that you want to do and you've never been allowed to? What are the few things that you tried and failed, but you want to try again? And most importantly, like, where are we as an organization really? And once you listen to the people that know, and then allow them to activate and take their handcuffs off. And when something fails, you ask them, hey, what could I have done differently to help you differently to make that success? The whole dynamic changes. And it's like a wildfire. Once it starts, man, you can't stop. people from altering what you're doing. I just read an article about the owner or CEO of Ritz-Carlton in the late 80s when that brand was dying, and every full-time employee could correct any mistake up to $2,000. Now, most corrections were $60, $40, buy a cup of coffee, free valet parking. Some, though, were jumping on a plane to bring a laptop, computer, so that forgot during a presentation. And the whole thing was, we want people talking about the Ritz-Carlton, as the best place in the world, because the average traveler that's a Ritz-Carlton person spends 200 grand over the course of their career. It's worth that free valet parking. That's what we put in play in Tampa. Maybe not the $2,000 mark, but buy someone their hot dogs and sodas. And I do it to this day. Every night I walk up to a concession stand. I always eat a hot dog, by the way, and I just start taking people behind me, 3 or 4 groups. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? I never say who I am. I never talk about that. But those small things change what's happening. Upgrading people's seats. Tonight is another example. I have 8 seats for my family tonight. None of them are coming. I don't know why, but I'll just go find 6 other people, from the upper bowl to come sit in my seats. It's those little points of connection that I learned in Tampa that we're still doing today. When you listen to people, an amazing thing happens. They own what they're doing. And we turned it all around, won a Stanley Cup, led the league in attendance, made the building the busiest building in America. Just really, really cool things. That whole city was transformed around our success, the Bucks' success, when we were both the worst teams in sports.
Yeah. Those are such great examples. And I remember hearing you speak before and to research about how you sort of transformed or the way you envisioned the business in sports in Tampa Bay with, partnering with the community, with partnering with the other sports franchise instead of being siloed. Can you talk a little bit about that approach?
Yeah, and one of the main things, when we walked in the door, they hired a company to run the arena. So you had the arena business, you had the team itself, team operations, and then you had the team business. 3 very separate things. You literally had 2 box offices, 2 HR departments, 2 accounting departments. You had 3 different Christmas parties. You had 3 different schedules of who's doing what. And I just didn't understand it. And, first thing we did was try to break down those silos. It's one thing to say, you can't do it from externally. You got to do it internally, outward. And, first thing we did is, we bought that company out. And you don't need a management company. We are a management company. This is what we should be doing. And we hired most of the people from that company. But it sounds like a small thing, but it was major to have everyone paid on the same day. It was major to have the same, playbook from an HR principal standpoint and those little things. And again, we all celebrated, together. So you break down those silos first and foremost, and then you build a connection with, hockey operations and to everything else you're doing. So many organizations treat that area as if, they're deity. So don't even look at the GM, but I'm really proud of there and then here as well. All of our offices flowing out of each other. There's one area for your coffee and your drinks. There's one common restroom area. Conference room sit in the middle of it. We're fortunate. Barry Trotz here is such a dynamic person. He's our GM, was our first coach. He loves walking through the sales area. He loves popping down to the event coordinators area and just plopping down. Like, hey, what's up? What are you guys doing? And he's not doing that because he's trying to give them life lessons. He's learning as well. So when that's real, you're not just faking it, those silos just don't exist. Everyone realizes we're all in this together. Saturday night, we have a doubleheader of Nate Bargatze concerts, one Friday night, 2 Saturday. In between those shows on Saturday, myself, every executive, every full-time employee will be picking up garbage in the Arena Bowl to make sure the Arena Bowl is clean for the next group coming. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in other places, but the places it happens, it's pretty cool. If you're a part-time employee or event service staff, and you see all the suits, right? The people coming down from the ivory towers doing the same job you're doing. It makes life easier when things are tough. So it is about breaking down silos, reminding each one of us what's important. And what's important are the people coming in our front doors as guests, people coming in the back doors as our performers and our players. You want to make sure that they all know that every one of us is committed to putting on a great show and doing anything possible to make them successful. Make sure the stage is set when they come in. The most important thing you can do on a concert, when the road manager rolls in or the first truck rolls in, make sure coffee's ready to go. I know it sounds so dumb, but I was a catering manager backstage. And if you're running around late or you're hungover or whatever, if that coffee's not done when they walk in, the tone of the entire day is wrong. And I always tell people, the magic to a great concert is at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever the time that truck rolls in. That pot of coffee is fresh and brewed, and you're there to be like, hey man, how you doing? It sounds dumb, but it's the way it is. It's when you walk into a restaurant, order iced tea, they're like, all right, I'll go brew it for you. All right, well, why weren't you ready for me to walk in the door? Kind of same mentality.
Mhm.
Everyone comes in, we treat like a client. And again, you do that, everyone catches it, it's contagious, and there are no silos. And that's to me really important. The other is it's more fun, to be an engineer or housekeeping person, knowing that you could have an input on the marketing plan, knowing that you can make commission on ticket sales. Again, those long days get a little shorter, when you understand what's happening a lot.
Such a good call out on, in the military that we call that a common operating picture, right? Like what is going on? How is what I'm doing here impacting the larger picture and giving people ownership of it? And what I also took out of that what you just described, and before that, talking about the going to Tampa Bay originally, was this lesson around how trust and respect has to go down in an organization before you can ever expect it to come up.
Absolutely. In so many organizations, not just sports, right? I mean,
Mhm.
so many leaders just don't get that. And sometimes it's out of, immaturity. Maybe you got promoted before you should have, and you don't realize that. I always tell people, appreciate getting promoted and the responsibility that comes with it. Because more often than not, most people I know have gotten promoted before they're ready, myself included. I mean, to the point where absurdity, where like, me? Like, how or why? But the burden that comes with that is recognize it. I
Mm.
mean, I liked working for people who are always candid and showed a little vulnerability. At the same time, you are the leader. And when a decision has to be made, get input, do whatever, but then make it. And that's where we're going. I know you might have to change directions tomorrow, but every time you make a decision, do so not authoritarian, but this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Let's go. And here's the plan. We built it together. There's no reason we can fail. Uh-oh, we just failed. Let's retoggle it and do it again. But I think we've all worked where people are like, well, I don't really want to do it this way, or I don't know why we have to do it, but just shut up and do it. And it's like,
Mm.
okay. And then they're always shocked that it didn't work as well as it could have.
Mhm.
Again, I like people that say, you know what, I don't know if it's going to work, but we have to do it. We got to get across this bridge, if you will. We just hired a guy I started with years ago, and I love him. And he always has this mentality. It's asses and elbows, man. As soon as we decide what we're doing, all I want to see is asses and elbows. So let's just go. Or his other saying was, I remember our forklifts were down and we had 200 kegs to move. It's hotter than anything. It was our outdoor amphitheater. And we're all sitting around complaining, like, oh my God. Like we wasted half an hour complaining. And he finally said, look, guys, they ain't going to move themselves. So it's going to stink, but it's that, let's go grab a couple of hand trucks and start moving them. And a weird thing happened. We moved them, right? As opposed to just staring at them, watching them get hot. But that to me is, you have to be very strong in your convictions, but at the same time, a little bit vulnerable, but not out of they're making me do this, or that's the way it's always been, or I don't know why, just do it. Sometimes you got to slow down and explain why. Sometimes you don't. But the more times people realize you're making sincere decisions and unwavering ones, we're all going to be in. And it's cool. Again, I've worked for people that have been just the opposite and worked for people that are that way. And I know where I've always been more successful. It's working for people that make decisions.
Mhm. Yeah, I love this almost balance you're describing between like confidence and humility.
Yeah.
Like the ability to kind of hold both, at the same time, instead of like over indexing on one or the other.
Yeah. I remember we built the first ever all-inclusive club in Tampa. Now they're in almost every venue in America. Your food and beverage included in this great
Mhm.
club. I will never forget. It came out of an off comment by an accountant at the Pistons. And we were complaining about our per caps, basically what people spend when they come into the building on food and beverage. Let's just say back then they were $15 a head. And he made this offhand comment. He said, well, if we added $30 to every ticket price and let people eat whatever they wanted, we'd have a $30 per cap. We'd double our per cap. And it never left my head. I remember thinking, Dan Rapinski was a lot of things, but he didn't believe in what he said. But I was like, he's a genius. He's so right. And it took me a long time to get in a position where I could actually do it. So we built the first one. I remember our food and beverage provider at the time was like, you can't do it. It's never been done before. I said, well, why can't we do it? All people are doing are pre-buy the food. We're going to provide it at a level that they're going to love. They're going to talk about it. We were a bad team. So they were coming in to eat for free. Meanwhile, they prepaid it. Every game they missed, got paid for something they weren't, taking. And I'll never forget the first night we thought people would eat and drink X. It was like 3X because they couldn't believe it. Like you were taking 3 extra beers, only drinking 2 sips out of it. You were taking, 3 plates of, whatever. because you were waiting for it to disappear. Once it didn't, you normalize, right? But I remember walking our CEO through the building. He was up in Detroit, and again, say his name, Tom Wilson, invented everything we do. But on this one, he was wrong. He's like, I don't get why you're doing this. This is dumb. I said, well, it's so dumb that we sold 421 new season tickets. Last year, we sold 6 new season tickets, and we were awful. People are going to come out to beat us on eating and drinking for free in this amazing new club. But I remember he was like, you're wrong. This is never going to take fire. The Liquor Control Commission is going to take our liquor license away because you can't give away free alcohol. I'm like, we're not giving it away. We're pre-selling it. And every time someone comes up with a reason you can't do something, you got to come up with a reason why it works. And I'm not exaggerating. 6 days later, we started construction on the all-inclusive club in Detroit for the Pistons because it really was that simple. But again, there's an example of just because something's never been done before, and a lot of people are set in their ways, are going to tell you why it can't be done. Or my favorite is, I always call it the fire marshal clause. If anyone ever says to me, yeah, we can't do that, I say, well, why not? Fire marshal. I'm like, oh, you're a liar. Like, that is not true. And I called that because I remember in Tampa, we couldn't do something because the fire marshal, from the guy that was there forever. So I called the fire marshal, had lunch with him, said I wanted to walk through some things we want to do. And he's like, looks great. I said, let me ask a question. Do you know, I won't say the guy's name, but do you know this guy? He's like, no, I never met him. I said, well, just so he alleges we can't do this, 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 or this because of you. He's like, that's not true. So anyone that's ever worked with me knows the fire marshal clause is nothing but bullshit. Sometimes, by the way, it's true. Like 1 out of 1,000 times, you got to check yourself. But it's those things that if you're strong in your convictions and you know we can do something different for a better outcome, you got to try it. You got to push forward. And sometimes you got to convince people. Sometimes you got to bully it, though, too, and say, look, Sean, you're wrong, and this is why you're wrong. We need to alter this and just try it. And by the way, if we're wrong, what did it cost us? When I got to Tampa, the building was never finished. Just the guillotine came down on value engineering. It was never finished. And in the restrooms outside my offices where the event floor seats used to go to, there was this huge men's room with 3 urinals on the wall. And it looked like 8 pipes where urinals should go. And I said, why don't we have urinals there? Building manager at the time said, well, they never finished it. I said, well, how much is a urinal? And they're like, $375. I said, let's just go buy them. We'll install them. And he's like, well, we don't have to buy them. I said, well, what? Yeah, we do. He's like, no, we have them in storage. I said, wait a minute, the building's 3 years old. You have the urinals. The lines for the existing urinals are literally 30 people long. And you didn't hang them? It's like, we don't have the budget to pay the plumbers to hang them. I said, we have a plumber on staff. I said, by the way, I can hang a urinal. Not well, we'll probably leave. But let's just do it. And that night, we got a bunch of people. We all stayed till like midnight, hung all the urinals. And guess what? You don't have lines for the bathrooms. But sometimes you need to ask the question. But there was a guy who was responsible for running the building that never thought about taking urinals out of storage and hanging them on the walls where the pipes were. You just got to force people to think differently sometimes. And force is a bad word, but sometimes it does take force. The weird thing about it is you'll find some allies that you didn't even know existed that get excited about it because they're the ones that hear the complaints about the lines. They're the ones that hear, the players complaining about ice conditions. And all we got to do is change the way we're managing dehumidification. So the ice guy all of a sudden is a hero to the players who we all want to put in better conditions. But there's so many examples of that you just have to push forward on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then it gets contagious.
I love that. And as we come to the end here, I want to make sure we hit on the fact that, the Predators have been named a top workplace for 13 years. Part of that, you've mentioned, I want to say 4 times now, I've been trying to count in my head, about fun, about work being fun. I imagine that there's a correlation between top workplace and a focus on making work fun. So can you talk a little bit about what makes the Smashville culture so special and how do you keep it that way over time?
Yeah. And again, sometimes it's us against them mentality. And, I'm sure you do this many times in your own leadership world. You can't use it all the time, but every once in a while, they don't think we can do it, right? Or they don't want us to succeed. Let's go. And it's that weird pack mentality. But once you get past that, you have to find different ways to motivate people. I know in myself, when I was having fun, I worked better. Like if I could, whistle. I had someone work here not that long ago. I'm always whistling when I'm walking down the hallway. I get bored. I hate silence. And she said to me, it is so arrogant to whistle. I said, I'm sorry, what? I've never heard anyone whistle and gotten bothered by it before. And she said, well, you're making noise for other people. You think your whistling's wonderful. I said, no, I don't. I can't sing. My lyrics are off. And I thought, wow, how miserable are you? Whistling makes someone happy, or spinning keys on my finger makes that person happy. Leave them alone. Get out of their way. But if I'm enjoying myself, chances are I'm a better person to be around. And all of a sudden, everyone's being picked up a little bit more. And again, I go back to that book. I was turning around looking for the book. Fun is good. I give it out all the time. Mike Beck owes me money, for his vacation apps, the number of books I bought. But it's just, I don't care where you are or what you're doing, whether school, church, league, band, or restaurant. When you walk into a restaurant, the hostess is upbeat and happy, you're already set. Like, it seems good. If that hostess is on the computer, like, how many people again, what was your reservation, type in it, has a frown on, you're put off a little bit. Waiter or waitress or bartender greet you a little differently and they're upbeat, set your tone differently. So if you're providing that, you're creating your own environment. The better your environment is, the better you are. And it's just this weird, inertia starts kicking in, and that wheel keeps spinning. And it's just a more enjoyable place to be. When people bring their kids to work, which I love when they do, my kids grew up in arenas and stadiums. They learned to ice skate, in Tampa on the ice. They learned to play football on the Rams turf, on the stadium, and we had picnics out there. They rollerbladed on our concourses. They stole sodas out of the concession stands. Like, we all knew they were doing it, but all of a sudden, more people had their kids there. And let's face it, we hear kids giggle and, playing hockey on the concourse or knee hockey, your mentality changes and you're happier. And when you're happy most of the time, when things are dark and tough, you get through it together and you fight through it together. And that, to me, that culture is impenetrable. And sometimes you get that hedgehog come in, and you're like, why are they here? They're miserable. And you got to recognize it quickly and go talk to them and say, look, it just seems like you're not enjoying yourself. You hate the noise. Like, our offices are loud and I love it. And right away, you recognize when people don't like the beer cart at 5:00 every third Friday, or they don't like the ice cream truck pulling up in the plaza and everyone literally running out of a meeting to get ice cream. I think it's the best thing in the world. I laugh when that one serious person, like, I'm trying to have a meeting. I'm like, what was your meeting about? Well, we're setting the plans on handing out the bobbleheads tonight. Really, the doll with the spring on the head? You don't know how to get them distributed yet. How many people have to be in a meeting to figure out? Now, it is logistics have to be there. I get it. But giving them that 8-minute break to literally race each other to the ice cream truck and getting something they haven't gotten since they were 12 years old, and then come back in, all of a sudden those logistics for the bobblehead just got a little bit easier, right?
Yeah.
And, it's amazing what an ice cream sandwich could do for someone's mentality, or a beer, or a free t-shirt, or sometimes just, the office is closed. It's too nice out. Just go home, and everyone comes in a little bit happier. And here I have a neck brace on my back now. I don't do this anymore. But in the old days, when you could be a little bit more mean, if you said no in a meeting and started shaking your head before the person was done talking, you had to wear the neck brace. And it wasn't like that movie Up, with the dogs were on the cone of shame. It was, if you were wearing this, it was because you were a jerk to someone in a meeting. And let people talk. Now, we don't hand this out. We don't make people wear it anymore. But once in a while, I'll bring it to a meeting, and you just sit it like, come on, let the person speak. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Again, even wearing that, it was fun. We have a lot of foundation events. We connect with the community. We have the most active foundation in all of sports. We build a playground a year in public housing areas. And the fun thing about it is I'm always on concrete crews. I'm an old concrete guy. But there's another guy that thinks he's better than me. I'm like, wait a minute. And all of a sudden you end up having contests over who's making concrete faster, who's pouring it faster. The mulch crew's doing the same thing. And no matter what you're doing, this guy's the executive vice president. This guy is, the entry-level assistant coordinator at whatever. They're doing the same job and laughing while doing something great for a child. That's a good place to work. It really is. And again, I've worked at enough places that weren't like that, where I remember when I was in Detroit, and I love Detroit. I love the Pal Sports Entertainment, what they used to be. But I remember the reward for working an amphitheater show after a full day. You wore a suit during the day in July. And if you were working the amphitheater show, you got to change into your golf shirt at 5:00. And I remember I walked in one day wearing shorts and a golf shirt and do a meeting at 9 a.m. with the CEO. And he said, where's your suit? I said, it's in my closet. I was angry. He said, why is it in your closet? I said, because Tom, I can't afford to dry clean a suit every day. Number one. Number two, I got to work 8 hours after that. I'm allowed to change into my golf shirt. So let me just wear my golf shirt the whole day. Like, it was a small thing. And he laughed. And everyone else was like, shit, Henry's getting fired. And he's like, do whatever you want, as long as the show works. And it was a huge change up there. But I remember like how miserable I was every morning putting my suit on. knowing I had to go work a Jimmy Buffett concert at 5 o'clock till 1 a.m. and get thrown up on by some parrot head drunk wearing a tutu. Like, let me be a little happy. And I remember Tom Wilson has talked about that since then. I remember when this 22-year-old schmuck who worked for the food and beverage company basically said, I'm not wearing a dumb suit anymore. And by the way, I haven't worn a tie in 20 years. I don't understand why people do, because we're in the fun business. And you go to a bank or a funeral, that director better wear a tie. When you come to a game, you're wearing a jersey, you're going to buy a hot dog and a beer, maybe a 10-gallon foam hat, you have foam fingers on. You don't want the CEO of the company wearing, a three-piece suit, do you? And even if you do, I don't care because I'm not wearing it. And I'll end it with this: fun is good. I've never met anyone that was put in a fun environment that didn't have fun, as opposed to people put in a miserable environment and not have fun. And I'm not going to knock any of the other hockey markets, but we're non-traditional and we love it. And northern markets used to put us down by saying, Nashville, they're non-traditional. Yep. And we're fun. We used to have billboards that said, we're going to charge you for the whole seat, but you don't need it. Meaning we want you standing up. Where some northern markets, if someone's standing up, they get thrown out of the building. Like, we want you on your feet, right? Like, you want to be loud and exuberant. I don't like too many fans from other teams coming here, but the few that do, because we try to lock them out. I like after a game when they say, man, that was the best time I ever had, and my team lost. Those are good, fun implements. And again, we're a fun factory or a joy factory. Either you get that or you don't. And if you don't, go work in another industry. But if you work in the service industry, enjoy it. And too many people don't.
Yeah, Sean, that is such great lessons. And having a culture of fun and inclusion and getting people to have buy-in with strong leadership, I'm sure the reason you've had all the success that you have had. And I appreciate you taking some time today to share those lessons with us.
Well, I appreciate you, and congratulations on everything you've done. And hopefully you guys do your meeting here again next year. And I might sit down on the whole thing just to get inspired. Because again, for myself, I get a paycheck every week. I had that one little failure where I invested a little bit. But people that put their own, neck out there, their reputation out there, or the ego out there, and then their own money out there, it's so impressive. I mean, it really is. It's something that, centuries from now, we're going to read about that, like Robin Hood and, Ivanhoe, because that's what it is. It's incredibly inspiring. And then you mix that in with those that have chose to serve our country. It's pretty powerful. And I hope you don't lose that when you're in those meetings, because from an outsider, it is so humbling. And I walk out of there, walk in with a big ego, feeling good about myself, walk out thinking, my gosh, I just sat with giants. So thank you.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for being a part of the No Limit Leadership family. This isn't just a podcast. We're building a movement of no limit leaders driven to unlock our greatness and lead the world forward. If this made you think or gave you something useful, please, 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 right now, go hit follow and then share it with one leader you believe in. Challenge limits, develop leaders, fuel greatness.